Can anyone hear me? I can't hear any sound.
We can hear you, Councillor Bonney, yes.
Oh, okay, that's brilliant. All right, cheers. Sorry, I thought something wrong.
No, thank you. Can I just check also that people online can hear me?
Yes, can do. Did you see my message? Sorry, I've got to leave by 8.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Alan Horton from Microphone Test, and yes, I can hear you.
And I can confirm we can hear you as well, Alan.
Thank you.
I haven't done that for a long time, folks. Good evening. Welcome, members, to this evening's Scrutiny Committee meeting. It is 7 o'clock. So Scrutiny meeting Wednesday, the 23rd of March 2022. Welcome to everybody in the chamber and also to those who are online. We've done this so many times now, but just to ask people who are attending remotely if they can mute any devices in the chamber that you have on your mobile phones so we don't get any feedback, and if people online can also mute their microphones until they wish to speak and then indicates that they do wish to speak. If you can also keep your camera and microphone off, again, unless you wish to speak, as that will help keep the bandwidth hopefully in a suitable way that we can carry on. The meeting is being recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy, and the recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's website. And we might have a few pings as well. Members accessing the meeting remotely should be using their Swalborough Council or KCC laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and tablet device, it's not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as in remote attendance. Just for information, Councillor Denner, as the Vice Chair Scrutiny, is obviously sitting next to me this evening. He will be monitoring on my behalf of the online chat. So hopefully I'll keep an eye on what's happening here, and he will be prodding me saying if somebody wishes to speak remotely. He will no doubt also be taking part in the conversations we move through. So this is a hybrid meeting of the Scrutiny Committee, and welcome all members and visiting members, both in the chamber and remotely, and any members of the public that may also be joining us this evening. We have the following members of staff in attendance, either in the Council chamber or remotely: the Chief Executive, Larissa Reid, Director of Regeneration Neighbourhoods, Emma Wiggins, the Director of Resources, Lisa Fillery, Head of Finance Procurement, Phil Wilson. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Thank you. Head of Housing Community Services, Charlotte Hudson. Head of Planning, James Freeman. Interim Property Manager, Jeremy Pilgrim. Policy and Performance Support Officer, Tony Potter. And Democratic Services, Philippa Davis and Barney. Joe's not. It's not actually. No, Billy. Billy, sorry, not Barney. Billy. Sorry, Barney. Billy. I was doing my daughter's school box lunch earlier, and she had Barney bars. Sorry, and Billy bars, whichever. Anyway, sorry. Moving on. Have I missed any officers who are also in attendance? Please speak now or indicate on the chat while I'm muting your microphone and speaking. Nope. Okay. Agenda item 1, emergency evacuation procedure. I'm assuming everybody is familiar with what to do, and that should there be a ring in your ears. Does anybody need any assistance to leave the building at all? Please indicate and we can make arrangements. Apologies for absence and confirmation of substitute. Philippa.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Kempew, who is substituted by Councillor Peter Marchington, and also apologies from Councillor Bill Tatton. Thank you.
Thank you very much. the first part of this is a slightly deja vu from the meeting last month, but it's agenda item 3 minutes. Are members happy to agree the minutes of the following meetings as correct records? And please note the following: the Budget Scrutiny Committee held on the 26th of January. I mean, it's numbers 553 to 558, not 588 as was on the agenda. And the reconvened Budget Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 2nd of February, minutes number 563 to 565. Are members happy for me to sign those as a true record? Thank you very much. I shall do that in a moment. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Any members who have a pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest to declare, please do so now. Thank you. There are none. We have a very packed agenda this evening, folks, and I will say also, because we are also hybrid, and it's good practice in those circumstances, what we have done when we've been completely virtual, that we will be taking short adjournments during the course of the evening, just for people to have a get up, walk around, stretch, particularly also for those who are online, possibly sitting at a desk and looking at a monitor screen. But we do have, say, a packed agenda, and if we do, I give you a heads up now, if we do get to around about 10 o'clock and we still have quite a way to go, we will not be finishing tonight. We will be looking for another date to reconvene. So hopefully, whether that, if that occurs, that will be what will happen. So agenda item 5, an update on the greening of Swale House. Welcome to Councillor Monique Bonney, Cabinet Member for Economy and Property, Emma Wiggins, Director of Regeneration Neighbourhoods, and Jeremy Pilgrim, the Interim Property Manager. All are on online. This report is to advise the Scrutiny Committee of the works, progress and the financial proprietary, I said that right this time, of the greening of Swale House projects. And there was a recent, or there was a paper that went to the last cabinet meeting as well. So, Councillor Bonney, if I can invite you to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I think obviously there was some discussion around last time, and the paper is pretty much the same report, and also you've seen a cabinet report which is for the works to Swale House, given the tendering exercise that's taken place. So I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Emma or Jeremy, anything to add at this point?
Thank you, Chair. It's Emma Wiggins. I'm not 100% sure that Jeremy's with us at the moment. He might be having issues, but no, I don't have anything further to add. I think we started the discussion previously. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got so many pieces of paper at the moment. Right, members, as we previously we had started this discussion at the last meeting, which was abandoned, but I will open it up for any questions, comments from the floor on any part of the play on. It's a open session, so I think you did it last time, Councillor Davey, but you're first, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously revisiting old ground for the benefits of anyone who wasn't there at the time. On 213, I did ask in the initial meeting, and I'll ask again. What are the projections, or have there been any projections made on the possible use by third parties following the refurbishment? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bonney.
Yeah, so I mean, there has been some interest from various parties. Obviously, I can't talk about that because of confidentiality at the moment, but I think we need a clearer position, which we're working out through our new ways of working. It's fair to say there has been some interest from a couple of parties. So I think that will, as you go through a programme of refurbishment, that interest will, shall we say, harden. So it's when we've sorted out our exact requirement and space and how we're going to use it, which we're part the way through, and Emma can, Emma Wiggins can come in and comment on that. I don't think Jeremy can get in at the moment, but he could give you more information on that. But it's certainly something that's an important factor here.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Pilgrim is not on the call at the moment. So if he joins us, then great.
So just to help you out, obviously I can't identify any discussions, but some of it has been around public sector user and obviously private sector one. And we're talking not about, you know, the consideration would be not for a low peanuts rent, it would be for a good market rent, because the idea is that we get some income from our building on space that we won't need. And also it'll reduce our business rates bill, which off the top of my head is around 160,000 a year just for us to have occupation of the building.
Okay. Any follow-up, Councillor Davey? Okay. Councillor Gould.
Thank you. My question was really about, obviously it's slightly disappointing that we weren't able to get the funding from the decarbonisation fund to cover this all, as whether there was any hope for further rounds of funding of that, and whether we're being preparing to apply for that, and if should it come out.
Yeah, so that is it, absolutely. I'm asking the officers to keep their eyes peeled for any kind of funding pots that we could use, not just for Swell House, but for the wider property portfolio that we could benefit from. It was disappointing that we couldn't access it for this building, and part of that is sort of twofold. Is the amount of work we'd have to do in order to put in for the previous one for the heat pump would have required a huge amount of insulation on the outside of the building or the inside at significant cost. So we will be keeping our eyes open and looking for opportunities. Certainly after this sort of programme of work is done, you know, I know officers are collecting thoughts around things around the boiler, etc., and possibly any energy generation for the building. So, because we did future-proof the roof work so that they were either able to take solar panels, but there are other options, and I know the officers are looking at and considering that as we get further along the process.
Thank you. Councillor Gould, do you want to come back at all?
And if you hear of something, don't assume we've heard of it. So I always say that. So, you know, if you hear or become aware of those funding pots, then let us know. But the officers are keeping an eye out, a beady eye out for those opportunities.
No, I haven't got any supplementary, but thank you for that answer.
Thank you. It's just Councillor Bonny, when you said about asking officers to keep them peeled, it took me back to when we used to have Police 5 on TV, whatever his name.
Yeah, exactly. Keep them peeled.
Thank you. Councillor Eakin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In the table, just under 4.1, the 200,000 that's for minor internal alterations to free up space, would any of that need to go ahead regardless of whether it was taken up by third parties? Or is the 200,000 purely to get it kind of ready for third parties to kind of take occupancy? Thank you.
Councillor Bonny.
We have earmarked a really small pot for some minor alterations, just to get us in our new ways of working. But Emma, if you want to step in here, or if
yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Bonny. Yeah, that is an earmarked small amount, but I think it's fair to say that we are undergoing a process of, as you said before, figuring out just what space requirement the council staff need now that we are not 5 days a week in the office, and obviously promoting flexible hybrid working. So that piece of work is ongoing, and that will need to be costed depending on the space plan that we will need for well, you know, the new approach. So it may well be that other amounts will need to be found, but the precise amount at the moment, Councillor Deakin, is not known, but that is a work in progress over the next couple of months. Thank you.
Councillor Eakin.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for the answer.
Any other hands or questions? Councillor Whiting.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, this was proposed as a greening of Swale House. It clearly isn't a greening of Swale House. It's a refurbishment of the windows, the roof, and the undercroft. And I just wonder what due diligence has been done to suggest that actually selling it off under permitted development for residential, which we know we need in the borough, what due diligence has been done to suggest that that wasn't a better way forward, and then us moving on to rent somewhere suitable for the number of people that we now need to have under the new way of workings. And there are new way of workings, and people will work from home. We don't need a building for 600 people. And I just asked the question: what questions have been asked to suggest that spending £1.5, whatever it is, £1 million on simply doing the windows up, as opposed to selling it off, making some money, bringing some income into the council by way of permitted development, and moving on and moving the building, moving us and this council chamber elsewhere. Thank you, Jim.
Councillor Bonney?
Yep. So thank you for your question. I think you asked that last time, and it will have a similar answer to last time. Some thought has been put into that, clearly. It would cost us considerably to move, to either construct a building or to find a building with availability suitable for our needs. And as we currently know, we're adapting our ways of working. Even if you worked on an estimate of the space we needed, I'm reliably informed that there is no space available as it currently stands. So if there isn't, you'd have to construct a new building. And if you look at the cost of constructing a new building, it would be considerably more than the value we would get for selling this building in its current state, with a leaky roof, with windows that are at risk of falling out, that don't close properly, and with poor insulation. So even if it was to be converted under permitted development, someone coming in would be factoring in all of those costs and would be knocking it off the value that they would give us. So we would then have to look at what we would have to expend to build a new building, to go through the whole construction phase for that. And actually, do we actually really want to do that? Is that particularly environmentally friendly to go off and create a new space when we've already got one? And actually, for our vision for our town centre as an employment site, the vision is we stay put, and not to have a big shiny new building. Yes, I agree, there is a requirement for residential space in the town centre, but this is currently an employment site. We have a duty as a building owner, but also as a council, to provide our employees with a decent working environment. So it's not just a case of the financials, which if Jeremy was on, he could probably give you more indication of the detail of those. But when you consider that, along with all the other factors, it doesn't really stack up, and actually would cost us considerably more than what we're doing here. And you comment about, is this greening? Well, you know, you kind of split hairs as to whether maintaining an extremely previously poorly maintained building, and these things don't happen overnight, it happens over a decade or two of not investing in the building. It can't go on as we currently are. And as I said before, it's like heating a colander. If you've got single glazed windows, if you've got a roof that's not efficient and is also leaking, etc., then it costs a fortune to run. So actually, in the long run, it will save us money in terms of our annual heating costs and bills for that, as well as making it a more comfortable environment.
Councillor Watson, want to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I appreciate it. And Councillor Bonney, I appreciate your frank and upfront response to all that. But I suppose, Chairman, if I may, is my query is that this was supposed to be a greening proposition, and it's clearly not. It's just a refurbishment proposition, and I would like to hear from the 151 officer her views about the answer we just had from Councillor Bonney. Thank you.
Lisa?
I have to agree with Councillor Bonney. I think that moving will cost us an awful lot more money, and we have to, renting is a different funding pot, so we wouldn't be able to use any capital receipt that we did receive to fund that. And as everyone has said already, this is still a work in progress, so we are working through our options, but we need to make a building that's fit for purpose in the short term.
Thank you. Councillor Gould, see there's a note about a supplementary question.
Sorry, thank you. I sort of thought of a supplementary question a few moments after I said I didn't have one, but it was really picking up on what Councillor Bonney said about the reinforcement of the roof for possibly taking solar panels and or other things. It was really whether there was scope to look at sort of off-site renewables as a source, whether that's something that we can actually invest in as a council to therefore then offset our revenue costs in the long run. I mean, maybe that's more a question for the Section 151 officer, whether that's a permissible use of funds, and whether that's something we should look into as part of this continuation of this very welcome greening of the building.
Yeah, just as you said, mentioned that, Councillor Gould, the Section 151 officer just returning back into the chamber. So,
do you want me to come in to give her a time to catch up?
just a moment. Councillor Gould, can you give that question again, please?
Right, thank you. So it's just Councillor Bonney mentioned about the reinforcement of the roof to take solar panels as a source of energy to help with the continuation of the very welcome greening of the building. I was just wondering whether there was any possibility of investing in off-site renewables, which would then supply the council's needs by one of the private arrangements that by investing in something that we actually supplies our energy directly, whether that's something that is possible if we can't supply all our energy needs from on site.
I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on that sort of external funding, so I would need to have a look into it and come back.
Yeah, so if I can jump in as well. So with Jeremy, we were actually having that discussion only last week, is looking at the possibilities of, you know, whether it was a wind turbine or solar panels, etc., and exploring that in more detail. I think the priority up until now has been to try and sort out, you know, the first round of works to get this the external fabric in better order. And certainly we've been discussing that going forwards, that's something we should be looking at and see if that is a possibility. And obviously, Ms. Fillery would need to be part of that discussion when we've got a bit further down the road. But it is something that's definitely on the radar and needs to be, I think, going forward, especially with what's going on with energy costs.
Thank you. Councillor Gould, is that okay?
Thank you. No.
Councillor Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just going back to the you were talking about the study for how much space that we need in this building currently. Just wondering, is there an end date when that review will be done, or will that just be a tick on? Thank you.
Councillor Bonney.
Okay, so the New Ways of Working programme has really been led by the officer contingent rather than cabinet on this, because obviously they're the key users of this. Obviously we use the chamber, etc. So they will, I'll hand over to Emma, but because obviously COVID, we've had various lockdowns, then we've come back, and now we're hopefully back into a position where we can enter a new normal phase. understand the space requirement. It takes a bit of time, obviously, for that to work through all the officer ranks and all the teams. Obviously, they've all got different needs, and to see how that works. The worst thing would be to make a decision saying, actually, we're going to halve our space and then find we've got too little. It's better for us to take our time and work that through. But Emma, do you want to come in?
Yeah, no, thank you, Councillor Bonney. Obviously, we have a timetable subject to the Cabinet decision last week around this project. There will be a timetable for this contracted works that is running through to, I believe, the autumn with a fair wind. So what we want to be able to do is to run that in parallel and work around when contractors are going to be on site causing disruption because of taking windows out, etc. So, Jeremy, do you want to take your video off, please? So, excuse me, the aim will be to work in parallel with that timescale and slightly after that, because as Councillor Bonney says, we are now coming back into a sort of a pattern with people that are, in terms of their flexible working. We're getting a better idea now that COVID restrictions are being lifted, and further confirmation of that will come on the 1st of April from government, and that then will allow us to be clearer on the space requirements, but then also what configuration would be best, what floors we will need or not, how that then works with possible tenants. So it's a big piece of work, and we know, because of the original budget for this, that, you know, the all singing all dancing massive change is probably not affordable. But what we can do is work to reconfigure, say, the second, third floor possibly, but make it look welcoming and much better quality within the budget constraints that we know we've got. So I suppose that's the long-winded answer, Councillor, of saying it will work within the timeframes in parallel to the construction work for the windows and the roof. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind that everybody's more and more going now towards more flexible working and working from home, do we see that as much of an impact on the potential rental and space that we can, or the rental we will get back from any offices that will be let out to other businesses? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for your question. Yeah, obviously it has impacted us clearly and other businesses. What's quite interesting is other businesses that may have based themselves more centrally in larger towns or even up in London are looking for localised space. But equally, I'm aware of certain areas where they need to reshape their services and they need to expand. Some quite interesting things going on in the background. So I'm quite confident that we will be able to let our space.
Okay. Just on what Emma just said, what's the future plans, if we're aware of them, in terms of the COVID testing stations which have been operating in the car park outside Swale House, and rightfully so. But if that's going to be continuing, for a while, with that, I presume that could have an impact of when this work may or may not be able to start. I don't know what's the future plans for that.
Yeah, no, Chair, I think that it won't impact because my understanding is that, well, across the country anyway, but they are decommissioning. So I can't remember off the top of my head this evening when that will no longer be in our car park, but it's within the next couple of months. So that won't have an impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Yeah, I'm picking up on Councillor Neil's points and a couple of others. I just want to fasten in on the third-party occupiers. I'm looking at paragraph 2.12. Where it mentions around 1/3 of the building could potentially be freed up. And then paragraph 2.13 Then says, and the uncertainty of the outcome of demands for space post-COVID pandemic, both for the council's own use and that of third parties. My question really is very simple. Is any market study at all being done for the kind of people that will come in here and the kind of rentals you can charge? Because at the moment, I haven't seen any evidence of that. Is there one, or is there plans to have one? Thank you.
Councillor Bonny?
What, a study? Normally you would speak to agents and also potential occupiers to get a feel for demand. So you wouldn't necessarily do a study, but you would go out and get an understanding of where rental levels are. And rental levels will depend on not only the specification of the building and the quality of the fit out, but also the services that are delivered with that. So if you've got very short-term serviced office space, that will demand, it will attract a much higher rent than if you're letting something out on a much longer term lease where there's quite a basic fit out. So Jeremy, do you want to give us a flavour at all?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that once the proposal to carry out the repairs or remediation to the building is undertaken, and the outcome of the ongoing discussions and research into how many people are likely to return to the building, we will be able to evaluate more clearly the space requirements needed, and that it is envisaged that would probably free up at least one floor, which is about a third of the building, which would be the first floor. At the moment, it's difficult to let that because people wouldn't take the space with the windows, etc., being carried out, but we will then be in a position to review that more successfully. We actually have taken on a couple of tenants in recent months on short-term lettings, and there does appear to be the demand in the market. However, of course, with the ongoing economic crisis that the country is facing due to COVID and now the unfortunate situation in Ukraine, the market is extremely volatile. But any studies currently being undertaken are really going to be out of date very, very quickly. And until we've got actually a product in which we can offer onto the market, it will be difficult to engage what that market's likely to be.
Thank you. I'll bring in the Chief Executive as well at this point. Thank you.
We've set up a members working group last year, and which met 3 or 4 times to talk about how staff and how members would come and use the building. We agreed with that working group at the time that unlike some other councils, we weren't just going to dramatically reduce the space and staff come back as a result of what space is left, and that certainly happened at some of our partner councils. We've taken a co-produced approach with staff where we've asked them when they want to come back, but what we do know we know a number of things. One, we know that nationally things are beginning to shift, so they went very far one way with everyone being at home. We're not back to the very far the other way, but we're beginning to see numbers increase. So I think really until we've gone through the summer period, we will then find out what patterns it works for staff and customers to come back in. And I think to make any large decisions about, significantly reducing floor space permanently, at the moment we're working on a ratio of 2 members of staff to 1 desk, and that's working. But we really would ask that we have a bit of flexibility over the summer to see what staff want to come back and when, in line with business needs, to then be able to make some firm proposals following that, because our staff's well-being is, I accept there are financial implications and everything else, but the staff's well-being does have to come into this, and that's the approach that we agreed before Christmas that we would take. We agreed that with members. We've got another meeting of the working group coming up with members, and we will be revisiting that there to see if that's still the members' view. Thank you.
Thank you. totally agree with that. There's obviously been some, from my own experience as well, from my employer, that actually some staff are starting to miss not coming to the office, for not because they love coming to the office, but actually the interaction they have, and that they've been for the last pretty much 2 years quite isolated, other than virtual, and they actually to get back in and see and talk to people is very much an attraction. But Councillor Dender, do you want to come back?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, I totally agree on the staff side of things with Chief Exec, and we've got to put them first. However, I've not heard, or it's not satisfied me, that studies cannot be done of the kind of people that may want to rent space in this building, and we don't have to wait to know what it looks like, because they'll tell you what it wants to look like. We know approximately the kind of space that might be available. The word potential is used here. And we can ask people and do a study to see what kind of thing they will go for and what kind of rentals they will pay. So I really do think we may be dodging a bullet by not getting on with this now to see the potential out there. So I absolutely think a market study should be done. Thanks.
Councillor Bonny?
Thanks. You can, but as Jeremy has just said, the world has changed and is changing. This is, shall we say, probably one of the most challenging times for office buildings that there's been. You know, before we've gone through cycles, it goes up, it goes down. But as a company, you'd always say, well, we've got X number of bums on seats and we need this amount of space. But it's not that easy right now. And actually, with the product that we currently have, you would actually undermine the potential rent until you start. I've been through this process with office refurbishments where you're obviously, we would be even just a coat of paint and some really basic stuff, as well as, you know, the windows being done. People are not very good at visualizing that. And I think to do a study right now without piloting some form of space would not be in our interest and could undermine the rental value for any lettings. So I think we've been quite prudent, but also quite careful that we don't trip ourselves up. As Jeremy said, we've done a couple of small short-term lettings, so we know there's interest and that's been demonstrated. But, you know, as I said, the levels of rent can vary considerably from whether it's long-term or short-term office, serviced offices, and the space between those two is enormous. So actually, why do a study that's not really going to tell you anything until you've got to the point of you've created some of the product or freed up the space?
Okay. Just on that then, I think I've got Councillor Hen. Is there a risk potentially of that we may miss the bus or the boat may set sail? There'll be a number of organisations out there who at this moment in time are looking at how they operate and potentially to make savings. And if we're not sort of putting the feelers out there for them to come and have a look and give us an idea of what they may require or think for us to help the need which they may have going forward, we could suddenly find that by the time we actually do go out, that the potential market has gotten down so low because they've already found other places.
Well, I think Jeremy's got his ear to the ground here. So if there is someone that's interested, then he will always talk to them. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yes, we are continuing to engage with the market, and that includes both the public sector, other operators in the public sector, as well as in the private sector. We've had a number of inquiries, and we will continue to engage, and where we can do lettings on a short-term basis that won't affect the works in hand, we will do so. But it's very difficult to agree to let space and not be able to give a confirmed start date on when they can actually take occupation. So we are keeping lists of those people who are interested, and I expect that to continue as the market changes, and we will monitor every inquiry. I'm not actually, from a professional point of view, convinced that there is a huge demand out there, for one, and secondly, I don't think at this present in time we are falling behind other people in looking at space. I think we have a fairly unique product that is in the town centre. Is one of the few office buildings in the town centre that will be in a position to offer serviced offices.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Jolly good. It was something that Councillor Gould said about solar panels, and perhaps I've missed it, or perhaps it was in the cabinet report, but I couldn't see anything in the report before the scrutiny committee that said anything about solar panels or reinforcing the roof to take solar panels. I just wondered whether solar panels is an afterthought, or is that a project for the future? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so solar panels we're not doing in this programme of work right now, but it is the spec of the roof has been designed so that it future-proofs it, so that should we wish to put them on, there is the ability to do so.
Councillor Simmons, do you want to come back and talk?
That's fine. Yep. Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Whiting and then Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back. All I've heard tonight is there isn't much demand for office space. This is not a greening project in the sense that it was originally sold to councillors that it would be. And that's unfortunate, but I understand the economics around that. My question is, and it may be one that the leader would like to answer, is which committee will take this work forward under the new regime to ensure that the ratepayers' money is being well spent? Thank you.
But would you like me to answer that one?
Councillor Truelove.
Well, Chairman, the member did ask whether I would like to answer the question. and there's more than a 50% probability that I wouldn't like to answer the question. But as far as I can, I would say it was P&R.
Thank you very much. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up a question in a slightly different direction, and that is, I've sat and listened patiently to about 35 minutes, and I'm left questioning why this is on the agenda. We don't have a clear project yet, and I understand why. What we would have liked to have done is too expensive. The building has been allowed over the last 20 years to get into a very poor state. Otherwise we wouldn't have all these problems. We don't know exactly what our own demands will be moving forward. We don't know what the demands of the marketplace will be moving forward. Why on earth are we talking about this and not bringing it to scrutiny when there is a project to scrutinise? And I really think we should move on to something of more value. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. I will take that. First of all, the reason why it's here is because members of the Scrutiny Committee wanted it to come here. When it's been to Cabinet, there is a huge element of public money, taxpayers' money that's going into this, which members wanted to keep an eye on. And it is entirely appropriate and correct that the Scrutiny Committee, in its current form, do actually look at it, because it is the will of this committee, and it is and it's taxpayers' money. with regards in terms of the project plan, that's something which would be for the cabinet member to pick up. We can only scrutinise what is put in front of us, and that is what we are doing. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask a question of the cabinet member. The report claims that this work will, by providing new double glazing and insulation to the undercroft, reduce the amount of emissions from the building and improve its heat efficiency. Would the cabinet member consider that perhaps these environmental improvements do actually constitute greening?
I think I guess what the answer to that will be, but Councillor Bonney.
Thank you. Yes, I think a lot of people get bogged down on what greening means and their own interpretation of it. And to my mind, it's about consuming as few resources as possible. And so building a new shiny new building for us, and all the concrete and sunk carbon that would go into that and all the construction materials isn't probably not the best way of having an environmentally sound way forwards. To my mind, it's about saving energy and to use what you have wisely. So I would say that this is an environmental project. It's also some fairly basic housekeeping that should have been done some time ago. Thank you.
Councillor Dender. Sorry, 1 second.
Thank you, Chair. Simple question, following Councillor Baldock's question. I meant to ask it earlier, actually. Do we have any quantification of those savings yet? And if not, when will we have some sort of study of what? I mean, I totally agree, by the way, with upglazing and trying to save electricity costs. Absolutely agree. But do we have any quantification yet? And if so, if not, when will we have some? Thanks.
I was going to also ask a very similar one before Councillor Bonney comes in, referring back to the cabinet meeting last week, and the minutes where there is a line about what are the expected carbon reduction and energy cost reductions. I think the cabinet member for the environment asked a question that to be information to be provided. Have you got that information available now, Councillor Bonney?
I'll hand over to Jeremy. I think Jeremy was looking at this.
No, I'm awaiting that information from the project manager. It will depend on the confirmation from the contractors of the type of double glazing that's being put in. That there are opportunities to make additional saving, but keep the double glazing well above the current requirements of building regulations. Once I have a confirmation of that, we will have a calculation. The only problem is with the calculation, it will give a U value, and then the U value savings will also then depend on obviously the substantial increase in costs that the council is experiencing on gas and electricity. The major part of that obviously is the existing boilers and maintaining those, which are obviously over time become less and less efficient. But this will substantially reduce, if you like, the need for loss of heat that's going out through the windows currently. And there is expected to be a significant increase in U value of the building when these works are completed.
So what we'll do is once we have that, we can circulate that, can't we, Jeremy?
Absolutely, yes. No, that will be freely available information, and we will be able to report hopefully that it's been a worthwhile project in those terms. There
was some initial work by, I think it was the Carbon Trust, which were the party that originally recommended various programmes of work across the council in order to reduce its carbon emissions, and this was part of the works there. So.
One comment.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the discussion about solar panels that was going on a little bit earlier. I wanted to ask the Cabinet member whether she would consider working with a community energy provider, so that, for example, there's been a project on the Cook's Kitchen in Sittingbourne, where Orchard Community Energy fit solar panels. The cost is borne by the community energy enterprise, and in return the council would sign a power purchase agreement over a long period, so over 20 or 25 years, and consume that power. So the advantage for the council is that we would have a much more security about the cost of our energy from those panels. And the community energy provider then uses the profit, as it were, though it's a not-for-profit organisation, to fund community projects. So there's a community benefit as well. I think normally these schemes have to have a large roof. It has to be about 50 kilowatts. But part of that is because the legal agreements can be complex, where you've got one company in a building and a different company that owns the roof and so on. So I'm not sure whether our roof would be big enough, but it may be possible to have a smaller scheme, because this would be relatively straightforward with the council occupying and owning the building. But there are ways there of further greening Swale House with no capital costs to the council, and in fact a benefit in the reduction of energy costs.
Councillor Bonny.
Yeah, thank you. And I've obviously seen the work that's happened with Cook and this community energy provider, and I think it's a really interesting one, and it's certainly something, we're open to all options. Nothing's been ruled out, and that sounds a really interesting option. We have to see obviously what the costs are to us and the benefits, and clearly there's one beyond financial.
Okay. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to back up what Councillor Valentine was saying. It's just an experience at the moment that I'm having. Kemsley Hall, we have spoken to Orchard. Unfortunately, our roof space isn't large enough, but they are very, very keen. And I certainly would recommend speaking to them. Ours can only generate 35 kilowatts, which isn't big enough for them. But certainly I would think this roof would generate enough to make them interested. So I really would recommend that you talk to them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, with the building as it stands at the moment, is there a useful working life of the building? Are we anywhere near it? We keep saying we're going to be putting on like the double glazing, the roof needs doing, insulation needs doing, etc., etc. Does there come a point where we say enough is enough and build a purpose-built building elsewhere where we can green from the bottom upwards? You can have everything in there that you like. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Bonny.
Yeah, thanks. It's a concrete frame building, is my understanding. You can put me right, Jeremy, if I got that wrong. But you've already got a huge amount of embedded carbon with that structure, something that was looked at as early part of our programme, or not even the programme, our discussions with our project advisors. And actually, as I said before, to build a new building, you have to use a huge amount of resources, be it concrete, glass, steel, etc. Our building is being structurally assessed. There's nothing wrong with it. What's wrong with it is the window openings, the doors, etc. and the roof. You know, flat roofs have an economic life and need to be replaced every so many years. When I was doing building studies, I think they used to talk about 20 years, but that's elongated a bit more now with better materials. You do have to, as a building owner, invest in it and periodically do housekeeping. So the short answer is, actually, is there anything wrong with the building? Not structurally, no.
Thank you. Do you want to come back, Councillor Neal?
Yeah, I was just thinking, if we get to a point where this building is no longer tenable, why do we not do it now? Surely the savings we would make in the heating that we would get from regenerating electricity, for example, like your solar panels and everything else, surely that saving would come in now. And every building's got carbon. I mean, we had to strip most buildings out of asbestos a while ago. I'm not quite seeing it.
Councillor Bonney and then Councillor Valentine.
Thanks. I don't really understand. I mean, you've got Victorian buildings that we've still got an economic life in them. This has got an economic life. It's still a viable building. Its structure in general, apart from the windows and the roof, is sound. To build a new building is a considerable amount of money. Do we have the space somewhere that we own? If we don't, we've got to purchase a site. And then you're talking about a build cost. Well, you know, Jeremy can probably give you an idea of what it costs per square foot to build a new building. And that would be way more than doing what we're doing. And again, it's about the other branch is that the view of what this building does for our town centre is an anchor point for employment, and that actually underpins our high street and our other services. So it has far more benefit beyond just us occupying it. It has a bigger place as part of as being part of the community as well.
Thank you for that. Councillor Valentine.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to come in on that point of sort of refurbishing versus a new build. There are two aspects to the carbon footprint of buildings we want to think about. One is the operational carbon, which is really what we've been discussing here tonight, the amount of energy you use occupying the building. But the other is the embedded carbon in the building in the first place. And in terms of not knocking down a building and building a new one, you have a massive carbon saving. Cement manufacture produces has a very high carbon footprint, and pouring all that concrete into a new building would create a carbon footprint that would dwarf operational carbon for many years to come. So the best environmental option is to use an existing building for as long as possible.
Thank you. No other indicators to speak, so just a couple of, I think I asked a similar question right at the last time we spoke about this, but this started as a project, whether it's green and whether it's not, but it's trying to make a building better overall for those who work and use the building. But the original aspirations appear to have been drummed down. By and correct me if I'm wrong, the budget now for this piece of work is £1.9 million, of which 1.586 million is going to be spent on the windows. What are we going to be getting then for the remaining £313,000? Because if it's 1.5 million on windows, I can't see us getting a huge amount or green savings for the remaining 313,000.
Well, you're getting a new roof, which won't leak anymore, and is a much better standard than the one we currently have. And you're getting insulation on the undercroft, which will help with the energy saving.
And that's been from the 313,000.
Jeremy, do you want to come in?
Yes, The costs amounting to about 1.85 in total are made up of three elements, which are the windows, which is obviously the most costly element, the roof, which will include insulating the roof, providing a better insulation surface. There isn't currently an insulation underneath the current roof, and obviously the undercroft. And the roof and the undercroft will substantially help with carbon reduction by increasing the thermal qualities of the building, as will the windows. The windows, of course, have to be purpose made, hence the reason that their costs, but the windows will actually probably make the biggest saving in terms of energy savings overall.
Thank you. No other questions from members? Councillor Bonney, do you want anything, final comments? Thank you.
No, but that was well timed because I've got to run in a minute.
We aim to please.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your time, Councillor Bonney, Emma and Jeremy. I would say you're welcome to stay or go, but entirely up to you. But thank you for your time this evening, and hopefully see you soon.
Thank you. Cheers.
Okay, so agenda item 6 is an update on the Rainbow Housing Company. Again, this was something which this committee had asked for, or to come back to the scrutiny for us to look at some time ago. To confirm in attendance for this item, we have Councillor Roger Truelove, Leader of the Council and Cabinet Member for Finance, Councillor Ben J. Martin, Cabinet Member for Housing, Emma Wiggins, online, Director of Regeneration Neighbourhoods, Charlotte Hudson, Head of Housing and Community Services, and the report provides an update on the progress made with the local housing company and any progress in developing the 3 initial sites. I don't know who would like to kick off, either Councillor Truelove. Councillor Truelove, over to you to introduce the report. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start off. So, members, the first thing I think you need to have a close look at is the governance arrangements and how they determine the fact that I, rather than the portfolio holder for housing, has to present the scrutiny meeting. So we have the Swale Rainbow Company, and this consists of a board of 2 officers of the council, that's Emma Wiggins and Charlotte Hudson, and 2 members of the council, Councillor Martin as the housing portfolio holder for housing, and Councillor Bonney, the portfolio holder for property. Now, since the council is the only shareholder, the shareholder panel consists of 5 members, Councillor Baldock, Councillor Perkin, Councillor Whelan, Councillor Jays and myself, with officer advice from Larissa Reid and Lisa Fillery. Now, the role of the shareholder panel is to protect the interests of the council, whereas the role of the board is to promote the interests of the company, and that distinction has to be understood and maintained. So the shareholder panel oversees the company to see A, that the council's finances are not put at risk, B, that the council's aim to increase the quantum of affordable housing is pursued by the company. And also, I think at these early stages, we are also concerned with good land use in Sittingbourne with the sites that are proposed as the early development. The important thing is not the job of the shareholder panel to interfere in any of the business decisions that are made by the board. And that's a really important point. So as shareholders, we can attend board meetings, but we can't intervene in any business decisions. We can be there to be consulted, but it would be, I think it's illegal for members of the shareholder panel to try to determine the business decisions made by the board. To do so would be, in effect, making themselves into directors. So if shareholders went to a board meeting and started to say, I think you should do this and I don't think you should do that, they would in fact be acting as quasi directors, which, you know, we're not allowed to do. So that's important to understand. So the focus of this scrutiny meeting, and why I have to present to you and not the cabinet member, is really to determine whether the shareholders are looking after the proper interests of the council. It's not really within the gift of this scrutiny committee to really question the business process of the board. And if that's a difficult thing to understand, if we went back to 2017, when the council was deciding to, you know, invest over 20 million in the Spirit of Sittingbourne scheme, when it came to scrutinising that, the answer to many questions that members wanted to ask was that is the business of the Spirit of Sittingbourne companies. It's not the business of the council. So that's the situation. Now, the report is fairly comprehensive. You know that Scrutiny has previously examined the initial plan based on a report by Savills. So we commissioned a report by Savills, and that involved using these three sites for 139 houses with a potential borrowing of 20 to 23 million. Well, things change, facts change, and the reality now is that the economics around building construction has changed massively, radically. There's a massive, I think it's about 80% rise in the cost of building materials. There is a shortage of labour, and that affects the cost of construction. And there are also a lot of challenges with logistics in terms of getting materials to building sites. So the facts have changed, the reality has changed, and basically the Savills plan, which we had 2 years ago, is not something that the board of the company considers is actually now viable. So the board, working with our development partner, Counties and Capital Consulting, have reassessed the way forward, and that's for the board to do. It's for us to determine whether that way forward is in the best interest of the council as a whole. So the plan is now to develop 185 units, but this or any other plan is not viable without external funding to support the council borrowing. So at the level that we were going to borrow, we couldn't deliver, and we cannot borrow a lot more because that would actually make it a serious loss to the council over a long period of time. And just to stress, the shareholder panel would not approve any scheme that risks the sustainability of long-term council finances. So the Swale Rainbow Housing Company is pursuing grant funding from Homes England to considerably supplement the amount of borrowing that we had planned. The discussions with Home England are going well, and one of the advantages of it would be, because Homes England is what it is, we would actually be increasing the quantum of affordable housing without considering perhaps mixing the affordable housing up with market-led housing. So that is an advantage. Now, the decision that the shareholders had to decide on Monday was whether to agree with the board to proceed with Homes England. And to do that, we need to become an investment partner with Homes England, and Rainbow Homes would then have to become a registered provider. So that they are the two things that we had to make a decision on, and they were the things that the shareholder panel agreed on Monday, and that's partly why the report is fairly late, because without making that decision, it wouldn't have been very worthwhile. So it's really to ask whether this scrutiny panel agrees that that is now a right way forward to continue with our plans to develop on 3 sites, to invest as a council, but also to bring in Homes England funding to determine that, you know, we would get more sites than we originally intended. We'd get 185, which is a gain. Working with Homes England is good because it increases the quantum of affordable housing. And we need to continue with this, apart from obviously our commitment to affordable housing. These sites in Sittingbourne are not best used. They're not best used in terms of land use at the moment, and therefore it's important that we continue with that. And at the same time, I think we are looking carefully at the proper management of council finances to make sure that there's no risk involved in continuing with this project. So, Chair, that's my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Trullo. Before I bring other people in, I've been recommended that members who are directors may wish to think about if they want to declare an interest. Councillor Martin.
I was actually going to say, just to clarify, we're here as directors at the moment, not councillors and officers. So that would be myself, Charlotte Hudson and Emma Wiggins. And therefore we would all declare an interest as directors, but we're here to try and aid the shareholder panel in answering questions. And I'll let them answer as well.
And I will repeat what Councillor Martin, or Ben Martin, as Director of Rainbow Homes, said in this thing as a Director of as well Rainbow Homes.
Emma?
Yes, as would I. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Baldock?
Don't know if I have to, but I'm a member of the shareholder panel, so I'll declare that.
Aligned in my introduction.
Councillor Ben Martin.
Yeah, as I say, I will try and aid the shareholder panel in answering any questions Scrutiny may have, just to give a quantity in terms of those inflation figures. People have probably heard me say it no end of times now, but inflation in the construction industry in 2020 was 14%. In 2021, it was 20%. It's currently looking like it's another 14 to 20% this year. So far, that's an aggregated 37% versus where we were when we had the original business case. So that gives an idea of why things have changed as much as they have.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Trullo, Councillor Martin, for that introduction. I'll open it up for questions from the floor. I've already had Councillor Dender first, and I've got a list forming.
Okay, where do I start? Those who remember when I joined the council in 2015, and Emma is online, so she will remember as well, as Councillor Bonnie would if she was still online. But one of the greatest frustrations I had all the time since 2015 was sitting in scrutiny, trying to get to the bottom of things with Sittingbourne regeneration and being told I couldn't as a backbencher. It is so frustrating. And all the time, all I wanted to do was help to explain it to residents of what was going on, and I could answer questions intelligently that were being asked of me. And here we are again. So if I cross the boundary, somebody will have to tell me. But what Councillor Trullo said about the panel and the directors, I still don't quite understand. I mean, I understand the issue of a holding company and a shareholder panel and so on. But picking up on a couple of comments there, there has to be accountability to the members in one way, shape or form. Now, presumably that's through the shareholder panel, I would presume. But the shareholder panel surely is accountable to the council as a whole. And that's the gap that I really struggle with. My specific questions are that what and excuse my ignorance on this because I don't know much about Homes England, but what is in Homes England? You say it's an investment partner that would say there's some investment. So what does Homes England get out of it in that partnership? And I did have another one, I think, connected with that. Sorry. I mean, what does investment partnership mean? And what conditions are needed for the grant? How do you get the grant? Now, excuse me if I'm crossing the boundary there, but
for Bill Councillor, Chief Executive first, and then Councillor Truelove.
Oh, right, I'm going.
No, just on you asked about how the shareholder panel is accountable to council. The shareholder panel we'll talk about the new setup because that's where we're going. The shareholder panel will be a subcommittee of the Housing Committee. The Housing Committee reports directly to council. So housing shareholder meeting minutes will be agreed by the Housing Committee, there is a very clear line between Housing Shareholder Committee, Housing Shareholder Panel, which will be a subcommittee, through the parent committee, through to full council. So,
thank you, Councillor Truelove.
Yes, the illustration that I gave you earlier, and which you backed up, is quite appropriate. I can remember sitting where Councillor Baldock is on the evening where we were scrutinising whether we should be borrowing so much to go into the Spirit venture, and the answer we got over and over again is, well, that's the business of Spirit of Sittingbourne, it's not the business of the council. What I would suggest is you ask what you want, and if we can answer it, we'll answer it. I think that's the right thing. And, you know, I have given you quite a lot of information this evening explaining why we've gone from the Savills model to a different model, and why we're going towards Homes England. And as the Chief Executive has explained, the shareholder panel will be part of the council's decision-making structure, so there will be opportunity to quiz the shareholder panel. It's just there are business decisions that they have to make, which until they've made them, it probably wouldn't be fair to sort of be asking, you know, trying to input into the decision. You know, if we're going to put more on this site than we originally thought, that's a decision that they have to make first, rather than anybody within the council say, well, I think it'd be better if you put it on that site. That is outside our remit. Now, Homes England is a government quango, and it's set up to try and help capitalise affordable housing. So it's not a profit-making business, but I think Councillor Martin can probably expand on that without betraying anything, I think.
There's not a huge amount to expand on, really. It is a government quango. It is there to assist not only in the delivery of affordable housing, but ensuring that there is sufficient viability to deliver housing in line with government targets. So, you know, for example, I think Homes England are funding some of the works on Queenborough, regeneration, etc. In this particular case, we would be looking, there's two potential pots that we can look at. There's the brownfield pot, which is not currently open, and there is the affordable housing pot, which is done through continual market liaison, and that's always open. So that's the one we're currently looking at. Investment partner status is purely a case of a registration, which you have to have in order to be able to unlock those grants. The only other elements that may be a requirement is that the housing stock has to be held by a registered provider in the long term, so it actually secures anything developed with that grant money in perpetuity.
Thank you. I think Councillor Baldock mentioned it a moment ago, but just for anybody listening, in terms of the future governance setup, that is subject to be a decision at next full council, which will be next week. Lisa, you want to come in?
Yeah, so what we're actually bidding for from Homes England is a grant. So the investment that they will give so it is not a financial investment that they will then be calling back on and recalling. It is a grant to help support deliver the number of units that we are aiming for.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Part of one of my questions has already been answered. Is it simply Homes England? What do they get out of it? Is it simply given freely, or does it put restrictions and obligations on the council? Another question was, Swale Rainbow Homes has agreed to become a registered provider. Why are they only just applying for this? Do they not need to be a registered provider under the original scheme? And also, if Homes England is a good option, why didn't Swale go for this in the first place? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. No, Councillor Truelove, good question.
I'll try some of that. Under the Savills scheme, there was no need to be looking for an external grant, and therefore we wouldn't really have been looking at Homes England. Sorry, Councillor Jackson, could you give me one more question?
I says, why did Swale Rainbow Homes has agreed to become a registered provider? Why are they only just applying for this? Do they not need to be a registered provider under the original scheme?
That is the question. No, we didn't need to be a registered provider under the original scheme. It was all self-sustaining. It's because you know, the board are applying to Homes England that we now need to be a registered provider.
And the other question was, if Homes England is a good option, why didn't you, Swale, go to them in the first place?
Well, I think I answered that.
Yes.
It wasn't necessary under the Savills plan. Councillor Martin might be able to add.
You actually have to prove that there is a viability gap before you qualify for any Homes England grant funding. So it wasn't an option all the time. It completely stacked up, which at the time of the Savills plan, it stacked up.
Councillor Jackson, anything to come back? Okay.
No, thank you. That's all been answered.
Okay. Councillor Hunt, online.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Can indeed, thank you.
Excellent. Just be good to know what sort of figures is being considered for Homes England. We heard there that the construction costs have gone up by 37%. So I'm assuming it's the roundabout figure that's being looked at is 8.5 million from Homes England. I don't know if any more detail on that. And the other thing is, what other options have now been considered, and have any options been considered? As things have changed a lot, there was obviously different options considered in the first place. Now there's the changes, and we have to be looking at, as a council, loaning money to a registered provider. What has been done to see if there are other registered providers already set up that is able to deliver these 185 homes on council land and with Homes England help? It could be a case that actually we could deliver 185 less than the 20 million that we'd be looking at.
Councillor Martin?
So I can't answer in terms of what grant value would be required or be asked for. That is most certainly commercially sensitive at this stage. What I can say in terms of other options that have been looked at, the board looked very carefully as to whether moving along a private sale route to finance affordable housing on other sites might be a method. That worked out as not being possible. Whether increasing the volume of other rental models might assist, so whether having private rental in there as well, that actually increased the viability gap. And in terms of joint venture, we return, actually that's one element of the Savills case that does still stack up. The council would not have control over those properties in the long term. We also would not have been able to realise a capital receipt. We'd essentially just be handing over our land to somebody else for free, which this council ruled out at that point in time. So this was what is the option that came out best placed when discussing at the board.
Okay. Before I bring Councillor, the beeping noise is a carbon dioxide monitor, which it's nothing to worry about at all, but it's in beeping because the levels are increasing. Councillor Truelove.
Yeah, I just like to stress that whilst we're actually talking about these 3 sites in Sittingbourne, and that's very much the concentration the whole purpose of setting up the Rainbow Homes was much more long term, and so the idea of commissioning this particular land off to somebody else is not really in the ethos of what we're trying to do. So we want to deliver on these 3 sites. We want then to develop the company in the interests of the council and in the interests of local people over a long period of time. This has always been a 50-year project, not a 1-year project. So I think some of the options that Councillor Hunt mentioned would not really be palatable to us as a policy direction.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, do you want to come back at all?
No, I completely understand what Councillor Truelove has said there with the sort of want to go for the longer term. I will just say I think the figure I mentioned of 8.5 million, I can understand it being commercially sensitive, but as a council, if we are giving money to Rainbow Homes, even that as with a loan, I think we do need to be clear that it is actually going to be stacking up. Obviously, that may be it's the shareholders that do know that information, but if it is just for the extra costs that there is in construction, then I would expect that to be no more than 8.5 million, as that's the 37% that we've been told. If it is more than that, then it wouldn't have been viable in the first place. So it's just something really that we do need to be aware of, whoever is making decisions to give over money.
Councillor Truelove.
Yeah, just to confirm, the shareholder panel, with advice from the 151 officer, will scrupulously examine the costs and the viability all the way through. And as I said earlier, we are not going to do anything that ends up with this council having to find money to pay back what we haven't actually earned.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, overall, it's a shame it hasn't gone the way it was planned, but then we can't foresee these issues. They may ultimately turn out to be a better plan in the long run. On the requirement for Rainbow Homes to become a registered provider, what are the implications on that regarding management? Bearing in mind that we still have no finance department that would be able to look after the rental and the maintenance of our buildings, are we still going to be looking at a third-party company who would be taking in the tenants, collecting rent and maintaining the buildings? Thank you, Chair.
I'll start and then we'll get a more informed opinion. As to a shame, well, in a sense, getting 180 properties as opposed to 139 is not a backward step, it's a forward step. And with this sort of guarantee, it's more affordable housing than it might have been. Becoming a registered provider will take time, and that's as a consequence, the programme it will be slowed down, but I think the outcome will probably be better. In terms of what implications that has for management, perhaps Charlotte could come in on that.
Yeah, certainly. So from the Swale Rainbow Homes Board perspective, what we have modelled is that it will be a managing agent at this stage. So we will get a third party to manage the tenants and the properties. And I think that is just because of the scale. You know, it doesn't make financial sense for us to set up that and manage it ourselves. So we might as well use, the companies, but they will be managed and monitored through contracts to our standards. So there'll be a clear role for the company to oversee that and manage the tenants' expectations and standards that we also require going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I understand the structure you're talking about, and I really do commend the cabinet and the senior officers who worked so hard on this project to get it where it is in the time they've done. I like the comment from the leader that this is not a short term. It's not just for 3 sites in Sittingbourne. It's a 50-year project. Can I ask how we will deal with directors and the shareholder panel in the long term? In other words, is it named councillors who are on either as directors or on the shareholder panel, or is it the jobs they do? Will it be the leader and the deputy leader and some other specified one? Because clearly there needs to be some long-term continuity, and councillors, of course, do come and go.
I think the intention when it was first set up was that it was based on members of the roles within the cabinet. Is why they went on to form the shareholders and the company. But what that will be going forward. But Councillor Truelove.
Well, I don't expect to be chair of the shareholder panel in 50 years' time. That would be unusual. Clearly, people are where they are pretty much because of the roles that they're playing. So, as I said at the beginning, we've got 2 cabinet members on the board, and one is the housing cabinet member, and the other is property. So it's pretty obvious why they're there, and it's also, if you think about it, pretty obvious why the particular officer's there. And from a shareholder point of view, it's appropriate that I'm there as a chair and that we take advice from the 151 officer. But it obviously will change as time goes on. And I think perhaps Charlotte could sort of develop that. Incidentally, in spite of Councillor Dendell's concern, I think we're giving you a lot of answers to a lot of questions.
It is what we expect.
Excellent. Yes, so just following on from what Councillor Truelove was saying. So one of the documents that's in place is the shareholder agreement, and that sets out how people are appointed to the board. So obviously, from the member's perspective, you have to be a serving councillor. It also says how people could be removed. So, you know, if a councillor didn't secure their seat again, then obviously they would be removed automatically from the council and an appointment would be made. Similarly, if myself or Emma left the council, from working perspective, we would automatically leave that, and an appointment would need to be made. So there are an outline in terms of that agreement going forward, which sort of sets out how that works.
Chief Executive is going to come in.
I think it's also very important to say that the officers, we can't ever ask an officer or make an officer be on a board. You have a legal obligation as that board member, and it is separate from your day job. So it is, you know, it isn't that just because you're this job you do this. It is an incredibly serious undertaking, and we would also suggest that no officer or member in future becomes members of company boards unless they've had training to understand exactly, you know, the responsibilities you're taking on as a board member. It's incredibly serious. And we also, as I've said, I have staff members who have said to me very clearly they don't ever want to sit on a board, and that's absolutely fine. We can't force them to. So it is very, very separate from your job, although having your job enables you to sit on the board. Thank you.
Can I just check on that? I think may have mentioned that in terms of sitting on the board, they have about the training. Is that within the requirements of the company that you have to be trained? And if it's not, is it something that we may want to think about whether it should be in there?
I think it's something that we as a council, we appoint members to the board. We would want board members that have been trained and know what they're doing. So it is something that's very different from what a lot of people have done. So it is something that as a council, we can't tell the board what to do, because the board may choose that they have to have training. That is up to the company to decide. We can't say that. What we can say is people who are putting members on the board, before they're on the board, they're not. And we can say we only will put people forward on the board that have the necessary training.
Okay, Councillor, do you want to come back?
Yeah, if I may, it was because of what that question has led to that I really asked the question, because it is a very substantial commitment. I've been a board member of several boards over the year. It's a very considerable responsibility, and not just an airy-fairy type responsibility, a very clear legal responsibility. And I'm delighted that Larissa raised this point of suitable training for both people on the shareholder panel and people on the board. And I would only, I'm not really looking for an answer to the question, but I would simply say that the shareholder panel and the board need to think about long-term possibilities. Swale Borough Council may not exist in 5 years. It may not exist in 25 years, but you know, things will change, and we need to make sure that there is a mechanism whereby there is a security of the investment we have made and the housing we are providing for hopefully 185 families. And I simply raise that as a comment, not a question.
Councillor, I certainly hope that Swale Borough Council will be here in 5 years. Also, not to see the colour that the Chief Executive's face went at that point. Councillor Davies, very remiss. Did you have a supplementary? So I did come back to you after your question. Thank you. Councillor Halton, online.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Thank you very much. Can I take this opportunity to thank the leader and Councillor Martin for helping us understand exactly where we are. Members will recall that I was never a fan of the Savills plan. Unlike the Cabinet, I don't think the business case did stack up, and I find this development very pleasing because I think we are starting to build something that does have the potential to deliver in the way that we all want, and the words that the leader gave about time frame were quite reassuring, that it is a long-term project, and long-term projects are very difficult to do with short-term politics, and I think that picks up on the point that Councillor Henderson was alluding to. A couple of things I just wanted to check, and these are probably questions for the Chief Exec because they're of a constitutional nature. I believe the Chief Executive said that the shareholder panel will be a subcommittee of the housing. Subcommittees, in my understanding, are formed from members of that committee, because if I understand that correctly, I think that places upon us as leaders of groups to think very carefully about who we put in there, because I do make the assumption that because it's a subcommittee, it would be politically balanced, so it would then involve members of parties that are at the moment excluded from this arrangement. Are those both reasonable assumptions, Chief Executive?
So as a true officer, I'm going to hedge my bets. Yes, except it hasn't been agreed yet formally by council that the shareholder board is going to be a subcommittee of housing. That needs to happen, but that is the working assumption that's the assumption we are working to. If it isn't, it will be a subcommittee of another committee, but we're working on housing at the moment. Yes, you're equally correct. It needs to be taken from members of the parent committee, which would in this case be housing, but if it was P&R, then it would be P&R. And also, yes, you are correct that it needs to be politically balanced. What does need to be resolved, and I know that it's something that councillors are thinking about, is the appropriate number of people, members of the subcommittee, because we have 5 as the shareholder board now, but that could change, to ensure that a political balance is possible and works pretty much. So there are bits that haven't been sorted out. There are bits that councillors are looking at and will come to the working group. The working assumption is that it will be of housing, but it could easily be of policy and resources. That would be a decision for members to take when it comes to full council.
Thank you. Councillor Horton, do you want to come back until?
Yeah, thank you very much. That helps clarify that. I did actually have a question, which is something that I just want to pose to the shareholder board to take up with the board of directors. I am delighted to see that we have moved to Plan B, but given the tempestuous nature of business at the moment, I think we might want to have an eye on what comes beyond Homes England if that doesn't work as a solution. I am hopeful that it will. I think that's an excellent partnership, but I think we need to think what's beyond that as a contingency, and I would just like some reassurance that someone is doing that.
Councillor Trudeau?
I think if that was the outcome, we would have to think very radically.
Lisa, sorry, I thought you indicated that you wanted to come in. Okay. Is there anything else, Councillor Horton?
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Dender.
Yes, sorry, it's just a very quick question on the back of what Councillor Henderson said. And you explained about the composition of the panel and so on. Councillors, maybe officers as well, but particularly councillors, is there a fixed term in a ceiling of how many years a particular council would be on there, which is normal with this kind of setup?
There isn't. As always, the principal is the best people to do the job, even if they're 90 years old.
Okay. Any other questions from members or on in the chamber or online? So I agree, and it's been already mentioned that a good change of direction. I think is evident that it's going to be a better result longer term now than what the original plan was, and it's pleasing. I think that's the council was aware enough that I'm going to say that we were fleet of foot, that we didn't go so far down one particular route that we were hemmed into it, knowing full well that potentially it could have been a route to a very, very costly dead end. So I applaud that. The only other thing I would suggest, and correct me, Larissa, if I've got the group, if it's agreed next week, but is it the housing economy that's suggested it may go to as a subcommittee? So
that was the working assumption from conversations I've had, and that was a conversation that was had at the shareholder board. However, that's not for the shareholder board to decide, it will be for members. So we are looking at it. There are things we need to look at around political balance on that, and we need to be, we just need to do a little bit of work to have the business element, which could be large sums of money, which could be P&R, with the core aims of the company, which is what the shareholder board are interested in, which would sit in housing and economy. So we're doing that work, but we'll work with the working group of members. It will be their decision, not ours, and we'll put pros and cons, and then the working group will decide to put to full council.
Okay. In which case, I'm going to make a proposal from the Scrutiny Committee, and I'll put this to members, and the intention is to hopefully help this going forward, is that to whichever committee or subcommittee that this area of work relates to, that this become an agenda item for the first meeting of that committee after the May annual council, just to make sure it's on the agenda, so they don't have to discuss it and then bring it back to the meeting, which could be in September, October, November, whatever it may actually be. That'll mean there'll be another update to whichever committee or working or subcommittee rather, in probably around June time. So I'm going to make that as a proposal. Can I have a seconder? Are members happy with that as a recommendation? Do you want to speak on that, Councillor Henson?
If I may, I'm not sure that you're saying something which works, because it will be part of the constitution, and the constitution will be decided by full council. So you appear to be saying that it won't go to full council, it will go to the, let's assume for the minute it's the housing committee, and they'll decide how it works in terms of the shareholder panel. But that'll have to be part of the constitution.
Yeah, no, in terms what I was, that right part you're right there. In terms of sort of the equivalent of the update which we've just had, which would have come to us at scrutiny, that whichever group committee or subcommittee that this sort of update forms part of that first meeting, not in terms of anything on terms of the constitution. It's just to keep this live for councillors who are not either part of the company, shareholders or directors, just that individual councillors will have an awareness of it. That's the intent. It's not to say what will be the constitution or not. It's just actually keep it on the agenda for wherever it needs to be after the annual council. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to confirm, the hope, the working assumption is that this subcommittee will be set up as part of next week's meeting, and therefore there would be an expectation that there will be a report at that meeting, at the first meeting. So if you want to reinforce that, fine, but it's our intention as well.
Yeah, that's exactly, so as almost a double whammy. So that are members happy with that as a recommendation?
Really?
Okay, show of hands then. Agree. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, myself 10. Those against? Those abstain? 1. Okay, so as a recommendation that'll go forward, but thank you. Councillor Truelove or Councillor Martin, if you want anything to add in terms of something, or Charlotte or Emma as well.
You said if the directors had not worked very quickly and very sensibly, it would have been a costly dead end. It wouldn't have been a costly dead end, it would just have been a dead end. And I think what you've discovered this evening as members is the debt we owe to the 4 members of these directors, because it's been quite clear that it's not Emma's job to do this, it's not Charlotte's job to do it. They've been prepared to do it, and they put a tremendous amount of work and expertise into that. And it's not actually part of Ben's portfolio or Monique's portfolio to do this, and they too have put a tremendous amount of work and brought a tremendous amount of expertise to it. And I think we should acknowledge what they're doing, and actually, as you said, we're in a better position than we might have been.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
I thank the committee for its comments. I think it's quite clear that the direction we're going is the right direction. I think there are other benefits to the path that we're now going down, which will hopefully be realised as things come up. I mean, we've discussed no end of times how we struggle to get 2s and 3s on Section 106s filled. Well, the council will have an RP of its own with a bit of luck, so that may well help us elsewhere too. So thanks very much for the comments, and look forward to the new system and having some more updates more regular.
So thank you, Councillor Truelove. Thank you, Councillor Martin, Charlotte and Emma. Some of you have still got more to come on the agenda. But those who haven't, you're more than welcome to stay, or like similarly, you're free to go. Members, it is 8:47. I'm going to call an adjournment so we can have a stretch, and also for the people online to have a all round adjourn the meeting until 8:57. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Okay, if we can reconvene, please, members and visitors. Agenda item 7 and the okay. Right, I'm going to ad lib for a moment. So welcome back. Just for those also who are on virtual, Councillor Henderson has has left the meeting. Has given me his apologies. He's departed. So just for if you're wondering why if he's not speaking, he has left. Agenda item 7: planning appeal costs. We've invited, and they will be in attendance in a moment, Councillor Mike Baldock, Cabinet Member for Planning, and Mr James Freeman, Head of Planning for this item. The report presents performance statistics related to planning appeal decisions and costs incurred. A bit of further background. Back in January when we had the budget scrutiny, there was a discussion that was starting to form on this particular subject. And there was a general feeling amongst the committee members that I took at that point that it was a subject which the committee wanted to come back and have a look at. Now, my intention at that point would have been to have a further discussion at the scrutiny meeting in February to see what members, to almost pad it out and what exactly they wanted really to cover from this agenda item. But fate intervened on that one, so we obviously couldn't have that. So I then took it as Chairman's prerogative to do what I thought the committee would be most interested in as a sort of a start of 10 summary. So that's why it is here. But Councillor Baldock, I will hand over to you to introduce the report and take us through it, please. Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Chairman. According to my clock, I was back by 2057, and
it's now 2059.
I would just like to commend you on observing the trade union recommended display screen equipment conditions of a break after 2 hours. I think that's something that we should be looking at making general practice within this council. So thank you for that. I missed much of your introduction, I'm afraid, but yeah, what you've got here is the questions that you asked. In the words of Pinhead, you asked, we gave, to paraphrase, and I'm ready for any questions that you would like to ask and any clarifications you'd like.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to break it down and we'll go through each of the appendices for people to ask questions on those, but any general comments or observations? First of all, Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank planning department for the report. I'm very pleased to see that in 3.2 that we operate at a level way below the threshold, and without going too far at the report, the figures appear to be consistent throughout most of the years, and there doesn't seem to be big leaps and bounds. Obviously, we need to be wary, as I think it was Councillor Huntley pointed out, there was a council who lost their planning department or the right to determine the decisions because they went about 16.5%, but we're a long way away from that. So that was my general comment. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Davey for his observations. Yes, there has been on and off attempts to suggest that we might at some point run the risk of losing our planning powers. I think this quite clearly shows that that's alarmist, but we are doing actually very well. So thank you for that observation.
Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for the report. Very comprehensive. Unfortunately, when I print it on A4, I can't read much, but I did look at it on a screen earlier. Yes, on the general points, I note on paragraph 2.1, and this is just really a very broad question. The planning service does not undertake planning officer time records for individual jobs. I guess my question is that normal practice? I'm used to an environment in business running major projects where time is put to each task or each part of the project. And I just wondered, is it not normal in planning, as it is in legal, in fact, to do that? Thank you.
That would be an unrealistic demand to put on planning officers. You know, they are answering phone calls, they are answering questions from members. Sometimes looking at something might apply to more than one application, and then you're asking them to record all this, which is in itself quite time consuming and would take away from the actual delivery of the business. So yes, that could be done. It would mean that every time you take a phone call, you've then got to allocate it to the correct application. And I personally don't think we want to see our officers spending so much time delivering report sheets like that when they can actually be getting on determining applications.
Councillor Dender.
Sorry, with all due respect, I do mean that. I've written these systems many times over the years. You press a button, it starts. You press a button, it finishes. So I don't accept writing out report sheets, because it's actually not like that at all. My people in my projects didn't, you know, it wasn't any time at all to do this. I do accept your point, though, possibly, of the complexity of maybe working on general or multiple applications at a time. My real thrust of this is, if one is trying to, as a manager, is trying to manage a department or an activity, you want to understand where all the time is going, maybe not for the public or even for the members, but simply to be able to manage your department so that you get the best out of them. I would have thought, but I stand to be corrected, I would have thought that would be a good thing to do.
That sort of information would of course be FOIable. And your views are noted. It isn't the practice at the moment to go down that road. If the council felt that was a more appropriate way of doing things, then that discussion could be had. But as I say, you'd also need a far better software kit than we've currently got. And actually, we probably need a better software kit than we've got anyway. But I'll leave it to James to comment.
James.
Just briefly, I'm not aware of any other councils who do that time sheet recording in other planning services. I'm not aware of any. I'm sure there might be somewhere in the country, but I'm not aware of that. The only other comment I would make, there was some talk a few years ago when the government were going to introduce planning fees in accordance with the costs of each council. And as part of that process, the Planning Advisory Service worked with a few authorities, including ourselves, which did do a bit of timesheet recording, etc. Very complex timesheet recording on each application and each type of application. And it didn't get very far at the end of the day. It was just too complicated for the Planning Advisory Service to sort out what actually comes out of it. And I think that's one of the reasons why the government sort of deterred themselves from going down the planning fee income route. For setting planning application fees.
Councillor Hunt, online.
Thanks, Chair. Just a general comment overall. I think it is good to actually see all this laid out now for members, and it's something that we haven't looked at as far as I've been aware in the past as well. So it's good to see exactly what's happened in the past and what's happened more recently. And I'm pleased to see that it isn't as bad as what it could be. And throughout the different years, it does seem to be quite a general sort of similarities through the years as we go through. I think there's some years that are worse, probably when you get to an election year, strangely enough. But it is good to have it laid out now, and I think it's something that we should do in the future of keeping an eye on this and seeing what happens. It's especially good to know how a committee whether there's overturns on from officers' recommendations and how that turns out at appeal. I think it's something especially committee members should be aware of. Question also from what was said there about losing control. There's lots of different reasons why a council can lose control of planning, and yes, there is quite a high bar that needs to be done to get to that level, but it's something we all do need to be aware of, and it is good that now we have got these detail. We know that it's not in the position with the appeals, but there could be other things that happen. Overall, I think the question I've got is, what can we now do more that we're looking at this data? If hopefully we will look at it more in the future, but can we be doing more as members to look into some of the detail of where things have gone wrong in the past and where the council it has cost us money? I think we need to learn from some of the issues that have happened in the past. And that's basically it for now until we go through each bit.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, any comment?
No, it's a fair comment.
Councillor Gibson.
Yeah, more of an observation and a comment. Looking at the data here and that short space of time that we've said the time frame that the department and Mr. Freeman and the team have had, I actually think it's magnificent what they've pulled together in that short time for us. I would reiterate what Councillor Hunt said, and it is important information, but it is available to all of us if we go along. I'm quite sure we could do it, but doing it in quite such a formal way in such a short time just adds massive time pressures onto those workloads. And again, coming back to Councillor Dendo when he's talking about it as a project, my understanding would not be, unless it was a major application, they wouldn't deal with each individual case as a project as such. So in terms of timeframes, milestones, outcomes, and so on. So not like following a Prince 2 type methodology as you would with other kind of public organisations and projects. But yeah, generally, I'm really pleased to see this document here in front of us tonight, and as I say, I will commend the efforts of the team in producing it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, no other general comments or summary, so we'll move into the first appendix. So appendix 1, which is page 3 of 7. Councillor Board, anything you want to introduce or anything to note?
Yeah, I would just like to reiterate what Councillor Gibson said. This was fairly short notice, and it did take over 3 days of officer time to compile this. So full respect to our officers for getting such a comprehensive piece in such a short period of time under the pressures that they're working under.
Questions on appendix 1, members? Councillor Hunt. Thank you.
Actually, just a simple question of, could we just have clarification on the dates? We're looking at years of 2015, 16, for instance. Are these dates when the committee decision was made or when the appeal decision was made? Because obviously there's a delay in that happening. I just wonder what dates have been taken from.
Mr. Freeman?
I believe it is the decision date. I've got Tony Potter on the line who could confirm that, I think.
Mr. Potter?
Yeah, actually, it is the decision date that's based on, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I'm just saying, is that the committee decision or the appeal decision?
That's the committee decision.
That's great, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Davey?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think probably the most effective column is the very last one, which shows that the committee seems to make pretty effective decisions throughout, really, irrespective of the year or whoever it is the ruling party at the time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
So the final column of effective decisions is the total decisions made by the council, committee and officers. And to see it at averaging around 99% is really excellent. And that's where the 1% as opposed to the 2% target comes into play. So we are really achieving. There has only been one time in all these years when we even got close to the 2%. That was back in 2015-16. So I think it shows a really robust set of decisions from officers and the committee overall for the whole time period.
Thank you. Nope. Okay, we shall move then on to Appendix 2. Total appeal performance with overturns separated. Any questions or comments on that? Actually, again, it has been mentioned, but also I know the time frames were tight, and I also recognise and thank all the officers and Mr. Freeman and Mike for their efforts with this. It's also personally I love using Excel as well. It does make life a lot easier at times. But thank you for the work that's gone into this. But any questions on Appendix 2? No. Mr. Freeman?
Just a quick comment. Just be careful with the 21-22 figures, because obviously we've had the decisions. They may have not gone to appeal yet, or if they are at appeal, we haven't got a decision yet. So that's why you'll see sort of blank spaces there, and etc.
Thank you. Nope. Appendix 3, appeal performance overturns in line with officer recommendation delegated by year. Questions or comments, observations? Nope. I would say any questions on Appendix 4, but I can't actually read it. So I commend the data that's got, or the information that's gone into it, but someone on this particular appendix might need to look at how they do their presentations and spreadsheets, because I ain't got a clue what's on there. But if anyone can help with that, Mr. Freeman.
I think what it's showing you, the average appeals which are dismissed in the UK is around about 72%. For Kent, it's 75%. I have to say we're a bit lower than that at Swale at 68%. And the bottom of the list is our family authorities, which are supposedly similar local planning authority sort of type areas to Swale, and that's at 70%. So we are lower than the averages there. Now, I can't say I've got a study to say what the reasons for that are, but I suspect that probably for two reasons from my mind. One is that we get a significantly higher proportion of major applications compared to the total number of applications than most other authorities in the country. That's just the way we are. Don't ask me why, but we get about 70 or 80 major applications a year, which is far higher proportion than most other authorities have to deal with. The other part of this is we're quite a unique authority, because almost every single planning issue that you can think of is something which this borough faces. The only thing we don't have is green belt. But you've got most other authorities, if they're a London borough, is just a urban authority generally. In Swale, you've got urban, rural, coastal, flooding, non-flooding, AONB. You've got almost everything there that's been slung at a council to deal with from a planning point of view. So you're naturally going to get quite a few controversial decisions which have to be made. And I think that's a reason why possibly our figures are just slightly lower than the national average and the average you see at Kent and with our family authorities. But I don't think that's anything to do with the quality of our decision making per se.
Any comments, questions? Councillor Davey?
It was just a quick comment. It's legible on the paper that was sent round in case anyone wants to go back and read it.
And then Appendix 5, the award of appeal costs. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Looking at the figures here, which go from 2014, and the two highest are Barton Hill and Wises Lane. A simple question: what do you attribute those high costs to, on those two being the highest of all those?
Largely because they are huge applications, so there were a lot more issues to be gone through on each one, a lot more detail, a lot more backing reports to be commissioned. You know, if you're going to commission a report as a developer for landscaping, it's a heck of a lot more to commission for a 700 house project than it is for a 20 house project. So the costs of those applications are by their nature higher, and if they go to appeal, the costs at appeal will be higher because they are bigger. Sorry, I should be speaking to the chair, not you.
Quickly, Barton Hill, I don't recall it being that much bigger, but I might be wrong, than a lot of other ones.
700 houses.
How many?
700, I think.
700.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, observations? Okay. The paper is here for us to note.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Hunt.
Sorry, I did put right down, but you might not have seen it. I've just, on that last appendix, just got some question. I think from what was just said there from Councillor Ball, I think that's the one thing that I think I'll take from this with the figures. It is larger developments, probably allocated sites where we've made refusals and lost appeals, and I think they're where the major costs come in. Whereas maybe in the past we haven't refused and had to go to appeal on those sort of developments. So again, it's something that I think the planning committee need to consider as when we do make decisions, and making sure they are completely robust and we don't get these costs against us, because it's not a case of having to go to appeal and losing something. It is the unreasonable behaviour where the costs come to us. But just on this last one, I've noticed that there is some on here that have got unknown costs. And I just wonder why that would be, because for all we know, these costs that are unknown could be $500,000 or something silly like that. But just whether there's any sort of comment on that.
I'm thinking back to the was it the saying by, was it Donald Rumsfeld? There are known knowns, there are known unknowns, and there are unknowns we don't know about, and there are unknowns which we do know about. But Mr. Freeman, do you want to take that?
This was me at 10 o'clock at night looking through all the systems that we have on those schemes, and I couldn't find the cost award applications. And the reason why I couldn't find them is they were dealt with all together, because it's the same site, if you notice. And I had to dig it out from somewhere else, and apologies for that. I should have pointed that out. The total cost against the Fairfield House one was £3,500, and that was a partial award of costs only. And that's because we argued some case on the grounds of its existing use, and the inspector said that wasn't relevant to the decision making at the time, and therefore said it was unreasonable behaviour on behalf of the council, and we had to pay at that time. Apart from that, I can't remember too much about the case because it was too many years ago for me to remember.
Thank you. Mr. Councillor Hunt, anything to come back?
No, that's great, thanks. Explains it.
Councillor Gibson?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Again, I just wanted to highlight that the Wises Lane one, of course, was a Secretary of State. So that's quite unique when you look through that full table. There's nothing else that's gone to that stage, so that was Secretary of State decision. Clearly, the inspector couldn't make up his mind. Otherwise, it wouldn't have ended up at that door, I'm sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Martington.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I noticed the add all these figures together, it's 247,000 over 8 years. And of course, Bartons and Wises Lane, 195,000 on their own. So it's the money goes down to just 2 claims. I think there must be thought that too long. These cases are what's why you ended up with so much cost. There be lessons to learn in the future.
Yes, Warden.
Yeah, I think that I don't know about taking too long. I mean, Wises Lane did go on non-determination, but I would stand by. I mean, I'm not a regular member of the planning committee, but I would stand by the planning committee's democratic right to do what it thinks is appropriate. I hear what Councillor Hunter said, and I agree that more specific reasons for rejection are helpful, but at the end of the day, we are here to defend what that committee decides, and I wouldn't want that committee to be feeling it should agree something that it doesn't agree with just because of a fear of it going to appeal. You know, those committee members should sit there and judge it according to what they feel is appropriate, and we will, as we said, once they've made that decision, we will do our best to uphold it, even if sometimes they might not be great examples, and that's why we have the ability to go back to committee and say, look, you've rejected it on these 4 grounds. We think 3 of them are defendable in a appeal, but this one you really need to think again, and the committee can be asked to withdraw one of the objections. It still incurs some costs, but you know that opening is there, and I think that's handled really well by the planning department and the planning committee when that's gone back to them.
Councillor Martin, do you want to come back at all? Or is that okay? Councillor Martington, do you want to come back? Are you right?
Fine, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Dender.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Did I understand correctly? Did we say earlier that it wouldn't be as much a job to keep this up to date? I totally value the time taken to produce it now, but could it be kept going at all with a reasonable amount of time spent on it?
We could look into that. I mean, it would have to be, it'd probably come under the remit of a future planning and transport committee if that's agreed next week. It's probably quite capable for us as councillors to keep a record of as well, because we now get a weekly issuing of all decisions that have been made. That wasn't available previously. That's something that we've introduced in the last few months. So now all councillors can have, keep a record of decisions that were kept and lost. It may be possible that the software can produce that in a wider context, and we can ask that question of MKPS if they can produce this sort of information on a more regular basis. But if they can't, it is of course again more another officer resource. But I agree, it was quite a useful exercise.
Thank you for that. Yes, I think it's very useful, and if we could, but obviously not costing a lot of time, but I'd be grateful if that could be investigated. Thank you.
Can I just, not on this subject, but as a note, when members are looking to speak, can they make sure, please, that they speak clearly into their microphones, because it's some importance that people are struggling to hear when they're online. So if you can make sure that you do speak into your microphones, please. Any other questions or comments on this item? In which case, Councillor Baldock or Mr. Freeman, if you want anything to add in terms of summarise before we close this one down. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Similar to everybody else, you are free to stay and listen, or indeed head off home and enjoy the rest of your evening. And we move to agenda item 8, the financial management report, the third quarter 2021-22. Following people in attendance, Councillor Roger Trilove, Cabinet Member for Finance and Leader of the Council, and Lisa Fillery, the Director of Resources. The report sets out the revenue and capital projected outturn position for 2021-22. It is based on service activity up to the end of December 2021. It's collated from monitoring returns from budget managers. It's presented for the committee's information, and at this point I'll invite Councillor Truelove to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. And as you've just said, it's the report up to the end of December, but it takes us through to the whole year in terms of estimates. So we are projecting an underspend on the year's revenue budget of 99,000, although by the year end that could be a larger underspend. We're expecting that the total pressure from COVID will be 679,000. However, you will see if you look at Table 1 and Appendix 1 that whilst there are obvious variances over and above the budget due to COVID, there are a number of other significant areas of underspend. So the net impact on the revenue account is less than it might have been. You will recall we set aside a COVID contingency fund from previous underspends of over £1 million. And the call on this is so far is limited to the items in para 3.9, and so they total 290,000. So just to say, we set aside over £1 million. We're only committed to 290,000. So there should be a balance on the original COVID fund, which I intend should go into the general fund. Likewise, the balance of unused funds from the budget contingency reserve should also go into the general fund. So we created a budget contingency reserve of 2 million. We only committed 1.6 million of that at full council budget. So there'd be roughly 400,000 also. So that plus the COVID contingency balance should go into the general fund. Now, when we reported on the second quarter, we included a historical liability to compensate bus companies for disruption caused during the town centre highways works in 2017 for the Spirit of Sittingbourne project. On reflection, I didn't consider the revenue budget for 21-22 was the appropriate place to meet an historical cost occasion as part of an investment project. And so we are meeting this cost from the Kent Pool Economic Development Business Fund, which seems to me a lot more appropriate way of meeting that liability. If you look at para 3.7, you'll see that at the time of this report, which was last week, there was still a balance of 136,000 in the Improvement and Resilience Fund and 243,000 in the Special Projects Fund. I will be reporting to Cabinet on the 13th of April with a full list of the funds allocated, which I said I would do at the council budget meeting, and that will then show the final balance on these funds, and they will be the final figures for those funds. You'll note an update on our capital programme, which illustrates a wide range of improvements, including funds mentioned, plus the Sheppey improvement funds and several new toilets and several new play areas around the borough, as well as a number of other good capital projects. And finally, please note that our calculation of the revenue balance includes 198,000 funding from government for losses made previously on sales, fees and charges. So that's the situation. It's given the pressures, it's a pretty good place to be. We are coming with an underspend. We're able to transfer funds back to the general fund, and in due course you will see just how much we've benefited the people of Swale through the special projects funds and the improvement and resilience fund. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Trevor. Lisa, anything to add at this point? Okay, members, similar to the last item, I'd know for any general questions, comments on the paper, and then we'll look at Appendix 1 and hopefully flick through that fairly quickly, page by page. But any general observations on the main paper from what page 11 of the pack, which I've got through to page 19. But Councillor Davey.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is one of my process questions, I believe, more than anything else. It could be one of my silly questions I've said in the past. We're recommended to note the projected revenue underspend of 99,000, and then on the next page, the projected revenue overspend on services. And my question was, is that just a coincidence on the figures, or is that a way that the budget is balanced? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Lisa can come in if necessary if I get it wrong, but it is an overspend of 99,000 compensated by the income of 198,000 expected for the government grant, which then brings us back to 99,000. Is that correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that.
Odd that the numbers are so coincidental, isn't it?
Other comments, questions on the general points of the reports? One from me, what people think. I'm trying to, general question of why would we be using the COVID recovery fund, which unless I'm wrong on that, but my understanding would be that that's as it says in the title, it's to help return back or get interest back into the borough and what we do following the pandemic. But we're using part of that to repair the Swallow's roof, which I'm struggling to see how that's part of COVID, opposed to a gale force wind or whatever it was.
The COVID recovery fund is not some funding from outside, but from government. It was our underspend, and we thought it wise to have it available if there were extra cost pressures through the year. And these are cost pressures on the budget, and I think they could be argued to be occasioned by COVID. Lisa, do you want to comment?
Thank you. And the only other one, and it could be that actually because they are relatively so small for Lisa, on 3.10 about rationalising reserves to close that are no longer required. Will there be a list of what those reserves will be, or are we looking at such small? What would have been? Think back to when we did the budget, there were so many small things which would be a really long list otherwise.
No, we've been looking at reserves for some time. Clearly, a lot of them are earmarked, and if they're earmarked, they're earmarked. They're not available. But it does occur to us that some are earmarked but never get used, and therefore there would be a good reason to examine some of those and return them to something like the general fund, which is then available for need. And we've already done quite a lot of that anyway.
Thank you. Okay, moving then, if no other general points, this could be fairly quick. Moving on to page 20, table 6, the appendix 1. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I thought you might be going through page by page. I do have a question on page 17. On the Faversham Reach public footpath. coming from the Faversham Creek Footpath Reserve. I thought the public footpaths were KCC's remit. So why is this money being used from our reserve? Thank you, Chair.
Lisa?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a reserve that's been set aside. It's a long-standing commitment that we had with KCC on a development. It was actually paid in September.
Yes, David?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair. Also on page 17, Milton Creek Country Park Access Road, use of reserves. This is a favourite of mine. This is this 40,000 that keeps coming back every year. And the 40,000 has been rolled over, but now suddenly this extra figure has crept in of 34,740. And on the capital programme, it's therefore got a total of 74,470. I just wondering where that came from, and can I clarify, as I always do with this is for works inside the country park, not works by the developer on their access road.
I'm sure we have answered this question before, not about the additional money, but yeah, so it's the works that's not covered by the developer, and I don't know the exact location. I just know the general work that it's complementary to the developer work, so that it's all brought up to the same spec, and that there's not just a patch that's left behind of ours that's not up to scratch. And as I understand it, these are additional costs for the car park and stuff, so they're rolling it all into one project, and so that's been funded from reserves.
So it's from assessing what those costs are. That's how it's got up to 74 then. Yeah. There's a plan.
Yes.
There's a plan. Thank you.
So, okay, moving into appendix 1, to table 6. Any comments, questions? We'll do this page by page. Page 20. Councillor Davies, sorry.
All right, well, I was assuming you weren't doing page by page on this. So it's on page 21, the homelessness, the additional housing benefit. Is that a central government provided benefit? Thank you, Chair.
Lisa?
Yes, so that's the housing benefit that we're able to claim for clients that are in temporary accommodation or other housing, of which who are eligible for housing benefit, which is then claimed as part of the housing benefit subsidy.
Yeah. Page 22. It's 24. We're hoping we're all working off the same page numbers. Councillor Whiting's left. I mean, after from previous meetings, who knows what page we'd have been on? Page 25. 26. And then we move on to table 7, the capital programme 21-22, page 27. And 28. 29. 30. 31. The sundry debt outstanding. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair. On the 2 to 6 months includes 14k relating to one debtor. Is this the previous debtor that we discussed without mentioning names? Thank you, Chair.
Lisa?
Yes, it is still that same debtor, but I've been informed we've now got a payment plan in place for that, so hopefully that will be reducing.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair. ICT had an original budget of 299,000 and a revised budget of 349.
Can you tell me what page you're on, please?
Page 30.
We've gone past that, but sorry.
Sorry, my apologies.
It's like page 30.
You were going so quick. Page 30 at the bottom.
Yeah, so the original budget was the budget that was part of the budget build, and then this Cabinet in July of last year agreed rollovers from the previous year, so that increases the budget available in the current year.
Okay, thank you.
Let's come back to table the sundry debt outstanding. Any other comments, questions on that? Okay, Councillor Trelaw, if you want anything else to add or summarise.
Actually, no.
Thank you very much for that. You're not free to go yet. So on that, members, we'll move to agenda item 9. Lisa, thank you for that part as well. If you wish to stay, I presume you are. You are. Okay, thank you. So agenda item 9 is the. Let me see. I've got ahead of myself. Performance monitoring Q3 2021-22. Again, it's for information. But again, we also have Councillor Trelaw for this. Lisa and Mr. Tony Potter, the Policy and Performance Support Officer. So this report sets out the quarterly performance management report for the third quarter, October to December of 2021. And Councillor Trelaw, I invite you to introduce it, please.
And I'll be very brief. It's a very clear report. Members can read it. So just very briefly, there's an improvement across the general indicators. We've got our familiar friends in the red indicators with the familiar mitigations for why they're in the red. And we've got useful monitoring indicators of specific areas. And you'll notice the fly tipping is a very good level. So really, if members have got some questions, Tony Potter's been sitting here all evening, so please ask him something.
Oh, please don't.
Now you've done it. Okay, members, any general comments on the overall reports? And before we go into again, we'll look at Appendix 1 and we'll go through that. So any general questions, comments? If not, we will move to Appendix 1, so page 35. Page 36, the red indicators this period. Councillor Dender.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just picking up, and I probably know what the answer is, but picking up on the planning enforcement, obviously there's been issues with the resources available on this. But a simple question, it says year to date 60%, 2021-22 target 95%. How much longer have we got to go and how much closer are we going to get?
Councillor Trelaw.
Don't know.
There's an honest answer.
James is here though.
I can't give you a figure without. I wasn't expecting to answer that question. What I would say is, in the last month or two, we've now got a full complement of staff within the planning enforcement team. Many of you would have met the 2 new members of staff recently. They are non-planning enforcement people previously, so they're on a bit of a learning curve, to say the least. But I'm pretty sure our figures recently have been at almost 100% for the last month or two. So you'll see that year-to-date figure improve quite considerably, I think, above the 60. I doubt we hit the target of 95% by the end of the year, though. That's what I would say.
But as we always say, any improvement carries the weight of the lower figures earlier in the years. Yeah.
Yeah, so these figures are at the 31st of December, so there's still a quarter to go to reflect the activities from.
Other questions on the red indicators? Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Apologies for my absence there. I've got a question on page 36, if we haven't gone too far beyond that.
That's exactly where we are.
Brilliant timing. I did raise this at audit. and it's not strictly to do with this result per se, the number of long-term empty homes brought back into use. I know we're short an officer. About a month ago, I believe there was a social media post out asking for the members of the public to report empty homes, and I reported 2 from my ward. One, both listed, so both really needing to be brought back into use as soon as possible. And then we find out that there actually isn't an officer. So I did raise this audit, why we were advertising this facility when we didn't have an officer to take. Because I know it's worth logging, but it seemed counterintuitive to be advertising when it would just put more workload on our planning department already. Thank you, Chair.
So why ask the question if we're not going to do anything or with the answer or have an answer? Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, once the officers are back in post, and obviously there will be a list that they will be working in. So it's whether we want to record the fact that they've been reported as empty at the time, which obviously that's what's happening at the moment. It just won't be worked on until the officer is in place.
Councillor Martin.
Yeah, so to clarify, we did do social media posts to coincide with Empty Dwellings Week. Primarily that was promoting the no use empty service, which we buy into from KCC, which has been very effective for us. In actual fact, I believe as a borough, we have received more grants in the Swale this year than any other borough in Kent towards getting empty dwellings back into use. We do lack a specific officer at this point, and we are recruiting, but there are other officers within the private sector team who are covering that at the moment. Okay, it's not as effective as having someone full-time, which is what we're recruiting for, but the work is still being done and those emails are still being responded to. It's just somebody's having to pick up a bit of slack at the minute, and fingers crossed we'll have someone soon.
So what Councillor David was saying, so the fact that he's given you, or people have passed this information on, it's not going to be in a position where we're suddenly going to go back when we get something in post saying, can you tell us it again, that we've kept this information and we'll go back to it. Councillor Davey.
Yeah, the reason I raised it was because after I submitted the details, I got an email coming back saying we don't have an officer at the moment, rather than that this is going to be logged and and kept in perpetuity. That was the reason I raised it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions on the red indicator list? Any questions then on the amber indicators? Monitored indicators this period, table 4. It comes up on the next table as well, but on this one, and I appreciate we can't go into huge detail. Long-term working days lost due to sickness absence. We seem to be going in the negative direction, where it's over average 2 days at the moment. In terms of COVID-related sickness, is that included within the figures that's here, or are they recorded, or are they excluded from the sick statistics, and actually we're not counting that in terms of people's sickness records?
It depends on what you mean by COVID sickness. If somebody is absent from work due to COVID, then that is recorded. If somebody has COVID, but they are working from home, we record it, but it is not classed in our sickness figures.
Thank you. Okay. Table KPIs, table 5, KPI year-to-date overview. The red, amber, greens, and if not, looking online, table 6 MPI overview. Councillor Davey.
That was the one. Thank you, Chair. It's just a general question on this. On the number of visitors to council-owned or supported leisure centres, in the Q3 figure is quite low. Is that a normal seasonal variance, or there are any other reasons for that? Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Potter?
Ask Tony.
Thank you for that. I don't know the absolute detail on this one. I'm not sure if there's some COVID-related closures that impacted on this, so unfortunately I'd have to go away and ask that question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tony.
But Mr. Councillor Martin.
I'll declare an interest as a trustee of Faversham Pools and then say, yes, it is entirely down to being seasonal. In Q3, I'll be very honest, not many people like to go swimming.
Can't imagine why. Any other questions on table 6? I'm going again in the wrong direction now. Councillor Truelove, anything to sum up?
No, not at all.
In which case, thank you very much for your attendance this evening, and Lisa as well. We shall move on to agenda item. What is the next agenda? Agenda item 10. At this point, though, just for we may just go just after 10 o'clock, so I'm going to say to we extend standing orders for. Well, I propose we extend standing orders. Are members happy to agree with that? We won't be coming back. Sorry. Cabinet forward plan. The forward plan is a standing item for this committee, enabling us to consider what future decisions are in the pipeline at future meetings of the Cabinet, of which there is one left that's scheduled. Forward plan is on the committee's agenda essentially as an information only item. It's a 4-month look at what decisions are due to be taken by the Cabinet in the foreseeable future, and it's published at the start of each month and sent to all members when it does come out. The Scrutiny Committee is the only committee of the Council which is able to exercise a call-in of Cabinet decisions taken but not yet implemented. And as we have done previously, we'll run through this on page by page. So start on page 40. Actually, there's no changes, is there? No changes. Page 42. And page 43. That is the Cabinet forward plan. That's the last item of main business on the agenda. I'm going to take the chair's prerogative for a couple of minutes and keep you back for a moment or two. This is the last scheduled Scrutiny Committee meeting. Subject that touch wood, it doesn't happen, but if it does, it does. But there is always the possibility of a call-in. But this is the last scheduled planned Scrutiny Committee meeting before the end of the current civic year, and therefore the last Scrutiny Committee ever under this system for the next 5 years at least, as we move to the committee system. I have been a member of this committee since I joined this council, so it's over 12 years, and I've genuinely enjoyed the last 6 years as the chair. I have tried as chair to have a committee and discussion that's been open, fair and transparent. Previous to chairing Scrutiny, I was on the policy overview and then policy development review committee, and the strength of both of those committees was that we also had the input from officers and could have a full and frank and open discussion about the topics which were on the agenda. We didn't get it always right. There's been a couple of notable exceptions in my time on the council, and one or two, I'm not sure actually if anyone was here, where there were moments in the past of discussions about blue papers, and when we did the Spirits Inborn Regeneration, about members of the public coming in, which were always done with the best of intentions, but sometimes in hindsight you learn from some mistakes. But the quality, the quantity of items which we have looked at in all of the years on the Scrutiny Committee, and also particularly this year, has been, and I genuinely mean, it's an absolute joy to be the chairman of, and my thanks in no particular order, or also no order of importance. Thanks go to Joe, Philippa, Kelly and Billy, not Barney, and everybody in Democratic Services over the years who've supported this committee. We could not have done this without them. Also then to the officers and the many officers who have attended this committee over the years for their information, their insights. as well, and their answers to the questions when they're asked. My thanks to Mike as my vice chair, who's a couple of times had to sit in the chair. I will open up and be completely honest. There's been a couple of I'm a firm believer that if you have a vice chair, they should be given the chance to have some experience of sitting in the big seat from time to time. And there maybe have been a couple of times where I was a little bit late for a meeting. I do not apologise for that. I think it is good practice so that if there ever, and I had this from experience when I first joined the council, of suddenly being put into the role of chair of a meeting at about 5 minutes before we were due to start, and you go, I won't say the word, but oh dear, blimey gov, how do we do this? When you've had no experience of actually doing it, it is a baptism of fire. But Mike has been an excellent vice chair. And my thanks to all the previous chairs who sat in this role of all the groups. I think, again, coming back to the committee itself, its strength is in the debate and the discussion which we have. And finally, and actually this one is the most important, my thanks to you as the members of this committee for making it as it is. There have been times in the past where the value of scrutiny has been possibly questioned by some. I have never done that. I think we have shown, certainly the last 3 years, and prior to that, actually, we do have a lot of power, we do have a lot to say, and we are right to have explored and probed into anywhere and anything which we so desires. And it's my thanks to each and every one of you for your willingness to be able to do that. And on that note, I declare that at 21:50, we didn't need to actually extend standing orders in the end. At 21:58, I declare the Scrutiny Committee well and truly closed. Thank you, members.